Our top story, the United Kingdom this year is likely to have a miserable Christmas instead of a merry one, with several strikes that have been declared across the country. While the days are getting colder, the citizens seem to be boiling in anger. From the railways to mail to teachers to hospital staff, UK workers are certainly not pleased with what the British government is doing. And ahead of the Christmas holidays, most worker unions have announced strikes. The widespread unrest is likely to stretch until January. Struggling with double-digit inflation, the workers are demanding better pay and working conditions. Starting from Britain's rail network that has been repeatedly brought to a standstill over recent months, the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers has said more than 40,000 rail workers will stage a walkout before and after Christmas after failing to reach an agreement with the train operators. The Transport Salaried Staff Association too has announced further industrial action for the month of December. The workers protesting over pay, job security and work conditions will hold strikes on the western coast on the 13th, 14th, 16th and 17th of December. The border staff at UK airports have announced strikes around Christmas, leaving hundreds of soldiers in a position where they've been asked to cancel their leave for the second year in a row after they were drafted to replace the striking border force guards. Meanwhile, after several rounds of strikes, Royal Mail workers have planned 5 days of strike before Christmas Day on the 11th, 14th, 15th, 23rd and 24th of this month. Thousands of Royal Mail workers gathered outside Parliament in London on Friday as they began their strike over low pay and working conditions.
The people who are out here on strike today are the same people who not only worked through the pandemic, we worked for the people. We'd get their prescriptions, we would get their milk and bread. We would help deliver everything there was to the Royal, and we are Royal Mail because of they're our customers. This is not about pay, this is about our jobs.
Britain's state-run National Health Service staff too are up in arms. The workers are still dealing with the aftermath of the hit to services from the COVID pandemic, with a record 7 million patients on waiting lists for hospital treatment. Thousands of British nurses will go on strike on the 15th and 20th of December as the government refused to meet their pay demands. The British Medical Association, which represents doctors, said its junior doctor members would ballot for industrial action in early January. In a further blow to UK's health services, more than 10,000 ambulance workers across England and Wales are planning to hold strikes on the 21st and 28th of December. Paramedics, emergency care assistants, call handlers and other staff at 9 regional ambulance services are all set to stage a walkout. The teachers across Scotland have in fact carried out strike action for the first time in almost 40 years after talks on a pay deal broke down. Members of Scotland's largest teaching union, the Educational Institute of Scotland, walked out of classrooms on the 24th of November. The Scottish Secondary Teachers Association has announced a similar walkout for the 7th and the 8th of December. For more on this story, we're now joined by Adam Schwarz, who is a writer and a political commentator. Thank you so much for speaking to WION. Now, looking at the state of affairs, it seems like there's hardly anyone in the UK who is not going on strike at some point or the other in the month of December, and it looks like the country could be completely paralyzed. Is this unprecedented in some ways, and what are the measures that the government is taking at this point to brace for what's coming?
Well, the UK has a very long history of strike action being used in industrial disputes, but I would say that the extent and the combination of strikes that we're seeing in critical sectors really haven't been seen since the so-called Winter of Discontent in 1978-1979, which is leading to the comparisons between then and now. As you sort of mentioned in your very comprehensive report, we're seeing strikes in a whole range of critical areas to do with public and private life, postal workers, communication workers, NHS workers and teachers in Scotland. And so really when you have that combination of things that impact so many different areas, you have a potential for not only disruption, but actually chaos across the country. And of course, that's a very worrying time for so many people across the UK, particularly with the health strikes, because of the fact that, health is a very unpredictable aspect of people's lives. You never know when you'll need an ambulance or we need a critical care nurse. But of course, it's also very worrying for businesses who also rely on good transportation links and good postal and communication services. So, of course, that's the kind of point of strikes, is to cause disruption. But it's certainly a huge cause for concern for both the government and for the public. In terms of the government's response, I would really break it down into three different areas. First, I would say the government's political response to try to put its spin on what is actually happening. Essentially, it's trying to present the strikes that are happening as sort of militant in nature and led by very extreme unionist leaders. But I actually think that this is really kind of backfiring on the government, particularly when it comes to the NHS and the nurses' strikes, because, public support for the NHS is very high, obviously, after the pandemic, after they really bore the brunt of so much of the work that had to be done. And really, opinion polls show that actually the public, certainly on the nurses' strikes, are very much behind them. And then I would probably break it down also into, the kind of practical response of what the government is trying to do. And at the moment, it's talking about potentially bringing in the military to try to, take some of the demand off nurses for when they have to, when they go on strike. Of course, that's not an ideal situation because nursing is a very highly specialised area, and so you can't just replace one person with another with that respect. But finally, in terms of what the government's trying to do in terms of the solution that it's looking to, it is engaging with the unions. It is indicating that it is willing to sort of negotiate with them. But, all of the indications that we're seeing at the moment are that the government is not willing to provide the kind of increase in salary that really across the different sectors they're really looking for. And of course, the UK is experiencing a 40-year high inflation at the moment of above 10%. And so really, what they are looking for is not only, to ensure that they won't experience a real terms cut in pay, but actually that they get an increase on that, largely due to years of chronic underfunding in public services. But I would say, the most concerning thing at the moment is the fact that the government and, the union seem to be on a sort of intractable path towards collision here, because the government is simply not willing to provide the kind of increases in salary that they are looking for. And so they're looking to, or considering other measures, such as trying to ban strikes for key sectors such as in health. And I would say that would be a very unwise thing to do, because in the short term that may provide some relief in terms of the strikes, but actually in the long term that's only going to hurt morale and only going to cause an increase of people leaving those sectors. So we're certainly looking at a very difficult situation at the moment.
It is a very difficult situation at the moment, and as you rightly pointed out, it looks like there is going to be complete chaos when these strikes do in fact take place. But let me ask you this. Given the fiscal situation that the government finds itself in currently, how do you think it can actually get around to even addressing the demand that is being made by all of these unions that want essentially a pay rise? Number one. Number two, do these strikes in a sense strengthen the perception that the Rishi Sunak government does not seem to be in control and that things seem to be in a state of free fall in the UK?
Well, I think they're two very good points. I think just to firstly deal with your first question, of course, Sunak came to power about 6 weeks ago on the basis of trying to increase the perception of economic competence within the government after it had a very difficult period during the Truss era on that. So I think one of the problems that the government is facing is the fact that it's facing so many different strikes from so many different sectors means that if it offers a decent package to one sector or one group of strikers, that will then increase increase expectations that actually it will provide those those increases to other sectors, which may, of course, lead to further strikes if they see a result coming from it. But of course, Rishi Sunak, as we even saw during the original leadership contest earlier this year, he's laser focused on this concept of fiscal responsibility and trying to ensure that the UK's public finances are in a very good position. And so that's why I think the government's very unlikely to provide the kind of level of increases that the unions are really asking for. But I think you're absolutely right. If the government can't get a handle on these strikes or can't bring them to a suitable sort of conclusion, that is, going to create a perception of the government not being in control. And I think, really what the government has to consider is the fact that, you have to balance the costs between trying to increase the salaries for people in critical sectors with the ultimate economic damage that actually this kind of strike action can do. And obviously, as I mentioned, there's a lot of business disruption to the economy in the UK from these strikes. And, businesses will largely just try to get on as they can in the UK. But actually, for outside businesses looking to potentially invest in the UK, they're going to be looking at all these different sectors and saying, actually, we see a whole load of disruption. Why would we invest in the UK? And so actually it's, the government has to take a long-term approach to this and try not just to view it in terms of short-term public finances to ensure that actually the UK maintains an attractive place for foreign direct investment, which we know is an absolutely fundamental part of the UK's economy.
A very interesting and important point there, that not only is this likely to cause utter chaos for the people of the UK, but perhaps could very much worry and even scare away foreign investors. Thanks so much, Adam Schwartz, for speaking to WION.
Good to be with you.